Hey, warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined here in a minute by Chris Cichon. He does a tremendous job over at WBAL in Baltimore, and that means that we are going to get the Baltimore Roundup today. We're going to be talking a lot about the Coastal Conference, what sort of chances Towson have of making the NCAA tournament, how are things looking with Maryland and your number one under Buzz Williams, will they be able to compete in the Big Ten? We're going to be talking about those two things. We're also going to be looking at a little bit of Patriot League action as well with Loyola Maryland. I am very high on this Navy team who has over 90% of their minutes back from a season ago. That is number one in all of college basketball, so we're going to be looking at that aspect of things, and then just a few teams that Chris is feeling bullish/bearish on. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larsium, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds whenever and wherever. With EdgeBoost, 100% of gambling transactions do get approved. You do get cashback rewards as you use EdgeBoost, and when you go to EdgeBoost.bet, make sure you put in that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That gets you a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit up to $25. Only a little bit less than a week and a half away from the start of the college basketball season. Then once we get into it next weekend, you're going to be getting picks and analysis on every single game, every single day leading up to that November 3rd tip-off, so we're very much building there. Haven't been seeing a lot of college basketball news and notes. We're seeing some of these exhibitions. I don't make a ton out of them right now, so you're going to get a lot of two-part conversations here in the next week or so. And just for reference, I did do a specialized conference preview podcast for all 31 conferences, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, they're all on the playlist, so we've got you guys covered there. And out there in the great state of Maryland, more specifically the city of Baltimore, Chris Cichon, he has you covered there, and you're able to follow him on Twitter/X at The Big Cheese Show. That is CHEE on Chi before show. And Chris, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Greg, thank you so much for having me talking college basketball as we're very excited for the upcoming season. I know as a Towson Tiger, we've got the Loyola Greyhounds in our opener for the season, so that's a nice little battle for the greater Baltimore region in terms of college basketball supremacy, and Maryland Terrapins hoping to have themselves a big year too. But yeah, it's baseball to college basketball, Greg. I see you keep on grinding still. Very impressive.
I always appreciate you, Chris, and you always do a great job of grinding as well. You're covering a little bit of everything out there in the great state of Maryland, out there in Charm City. And how about if we do dive in on a team that you just talked about in the Towson Tigers? Because a lot of people forget, because UNC Wilmington was the team that made the NCAA tournament, but for Towson, they were the team that won the regular season in the CAA. They went 16-2 in conference, and under the radar, they bring back a lot from a season ago, and I think that they're one of the more interesting and one of the better mid-major teams in all of college basketball entering the season.
Yeah, this is a school, my school, that has not made the NCAA tournament since 1991. Head coach Pat Scarry spoke recently about the tough losses that they've had in the CAA tournament down in Washington, D.C. in the semifinals. They haven't even really been able to get it to the finals to have a chance to get to the NCAA tournament. So this is a Towson Tigers group, though, and we are the carriers of some of the games here on WBAL 1090 FM, so we'll be covering them as well here, too. You know, there's predictions for this team to be finishing at the top of the CAA. This is a group that brings back Williamson and Tejada. Tyler Tejada, he was one of the 5 conference players of the year to return to the school. You've got Dylan Williamson, a preseason All-CAA first-team selection. And so when they get going for their November 3rd opener against Loyola, I would imagine those two are going to be big pieces for Scary's team. But yeah, this is a group, if you're looking at the poll itself, Towson's at the top of it, but only 6 points separate Towson in third place. Charleston, who is really the cream of this conference over the past couple of years. We know how they have been a run and gun team that also has been able to shoot the three really well. And you mentioned UNC Wilmington. They're in second, 4 points behind Towson with 5 first-place votes. So, yeah, this is a team that has an easier path now than when I went to school and George Mason was in the conference and VCU was there. Certainly easier opponents when you're talking about North Carolina A&T, who has been rather dreadful to say the least since they've joined the conference. Stony Brook as well too has been somewhat beatable there, and they're lower on the rankings coming into this season in the CAA. Elon towards the bottom there too, but you can make arguments. Drexel can bring it every night. Hofstra's had success. Monmouth, I don't necessarily know if they're going to be all that great, but I know that Monmouth is a school that sits on the beach in New Jersey, and if they're able to sell that as potentially a nice destination for a mid-major type of player, they could maybe be somewhat of a formidable opponent. William & Mary is a stalwart in the CAA. A couple of years ago, they've had a nice little point guard there. This is certainly a team, that I think is going to be a good one, Towson. But if you're looking at this CAA all-first team here, it's represented well by the schools who have been in this conference for a while. You've got Colby Duggan of Charleston, Cruz Davis of Hofstra, and CJ Luster of UNC Wilmington. So, yeah, those are all schools that are on or near the top of the rankings when it comes to the CAA. So we should have ourselves, I would think, Towson, a successful season. But there's somebody here that also went to Towson on the second floor of the WBAL building, and we say the same thing to each other. It's basically NCAA tournament or bust at this point for Towson, because it's nice to do well during the regular season, but it's time to get to the next level.
Yep, it certainly is, and we shall see if Towson is going to be able to do so. And I think that it is so interesting that you know this very well with your ties to Towson, as we do have our good friend Chris Cichon. He does great work over at WBAL in Baltimore, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. That they play such a slow and deliberate style, and I think that that's one of the hallmarks of the CAA. You've got a team in William & Mary that they just take a whole bunch of threes, 100 million billion of them. You've got a team in Towson that plays super slow. Charleston, now under year number 2 of Chris Mack, they've become very much more of an offense-oriented team, and you just don't see a lot of teams like Towson in this day and age of college basketball, where instead of emphasizing trying to get to 80 points, they are very much defense-oriented and one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball.
Yeah, that's a testament to Pat Scarry, a guy who has been with this program now for quite a few years, taking over in 2011. This is kind of his pride and joy, is having guys who can play defense. And also, too, if they are able to have guys like Nicholas Timberlake, who ended up transferring to Kansas a couple of seasons ago, who could absolutely shoot the 3-ball. And then you've got guys from the past like Charles Thompson. His father was a boxer, I remember. He was dominating force down low. So it's really been a matter of Scarry being able to win multiple different ways here. It's just a shame that they haven't really been able to get to that next level, as I've mentioned. And, I mentioned another guy too, Jason Gibson. He was a CAA All-Defensive Team member as well as CAA All-Rookie Team member right after the COVID years, I want to say 21, 22. And Jason Gibson, a guy that was playing hurt down the stretch a couple of years ago when I thought Towson with Timberlake had their best opportunity to make the NCAA tournament. He was lights out from 3 in a number of games in the middle of the year. But yeah, you get to March and it's a long season, and some of these guys are banged up. We saw that with Maryland and the Crab Five last year, when those guys were pretty much on the floor constantly for Kevin Willard. But yeah, this is a scary coach who has certainly done a nice job with this Towson team. There are some on the campus who think that he's been there maybe long enough without an NCAA tournament berth, but he's somebody who's been in the game a whole long time. He's got stops at College of Charleston. He's been with William & Mary, Northeastern University, so he's been around the CAA too. He's been with Pitt. A guy who, is an old school basketball coach, and Pat Kennedy before him was the same way from Florida State and DePaul, ended up at Towson. So seems to be the trend here, not so much with Loyola, who went with a younger guy, Josh Loeffler, but yeah, Towson's got some of the old, and Vince Angotti, he's another one from the 80s. So yeah, they like to go with their old school coaches. That's for sure.
Yes, they certainly do, and I'll never forget Pat Scarry for the fact that he took a 1-win Towson team and turned them the next year into a 20-win team. You just don't see a team go from 1 to 20. I think it was like either the first or second time in college basketball history. So a guy that clearly knows what he's doing there, and we talk about Towson being slow and controlled. With regards to what we're going to be getting out there with the main team in your neck of the woods, Maryland, I feel like we might be getting a little bit more of that as well. As Buzz Williams, he takes over after Kevin Willard decides to take the Villanova job. And just what has been the vibe and the sentiment around this Maryland team coming into the season? Because with Buzz Williams, he's had a whole heck of a lot of success, but I think that would be a little bit far-fetched in year number one to expect Maryland to reach the same heights that they did a season ago.
Yes, totally agree, but there is excitement because Buzz Williams was the guy that Maryland fans wanted, and he's the one that is coaching this team, and he's from Texas, so it was a little bit surprising to think that he would take the Maryland job. But I listened to his appearance during Big Ten Media Day. He spoke with Gary Parrish of CBS, and he basically said he liked the appeal of the Maryland job because at the time, Damon Evans went to SMU, so there was no athletic director, so he basically said, Buzz Williams, that he liked dealing directly with the Maryland president, Daryl Pines, and that's a big reason why he took the job. And I was listening to him on that, and I thought it was really interesting, and it's an approach I'm taking, too, to college basketball when it comes to NIL and the transfer portal. Control what you can control, and this is the new reality. And he basically was saying nobody really knows what they're doing. And when it comes to NIL, are you supposed to recruit young guys? Are you supposed to recruit the veterans in college basketball? Are you supposed to go overseas? No one really knows it. He's a veteran coach at it. So when I listened to that, I really heard a humbled man. It was kind of refreshing to hear, to be honest. But, Elijah Saunders, David Coit, those are two guys who have been discussed here. I know that Buzz Williams said that he liked Elijah Saunders as a human, tough-minded, tough competitor, high IQ. Those were some of the things I think he said to Andy Katz on that Big Ten Media Day. Him and Dave Coit both said how physical you've got to be when you play for Buzz Williams. They were talking about how they were at practice at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so, yeah, that is the physicality that you have seen with some of these Buzz Williams teams when he was at Texas A&M last year when, I believe for the first time in a lot of years, decades, that they were ranked every week in the AP Top 25. It's just a testament to what he has done and the successes he's had at Virginia Tech and Marquette. And, yeah, now coming to Maryland in a hotbed of talent in this DMV. We certainly know that. A lot of it tends to go out of state and to different universities and go south, but we'll see if he's able to keep some of these homegrown talent in Washington, D.C., too. A lot of great players there, a lot of great high schools around here. So we will see if he's able to bring some of those guys in. But, yeah, he's got a couple of these transfers in Saunders and Coit. Saunders, 6'8" senior. He's been at San Diego State, UVA last year. And then Coit from New Jersey. He was at NIU, then last year at Kansas. So it's a group that seems like it's a totally new group, but we'll see if they come together early or mid-season and if they're going to be a high-scoring team or if they are really going to try and grind you down physically. But, yeah, I think the vibes around Maryland, people are happy with the basketball program at the moment, especially with the football team having lost 3 straight games in pretty heartbreaking fashion.
Well, at the very least for Maryland, they were able to knock off the Wisconsin Badgers because the Wisconsin Badgers in football are losing to absolutely everybody right now. And just when it comes to the Big Ten, obviously in football, it has been very interesting to say the least. The Badgers have been awful with that regard, but I do want to, on the flip side with Chris, take a little bit more of a look at the Big Ten. Additionally, with Chris, we're going to be talking about just both sides of the Kevin Willard situation, some of his expectations for Villanova, some of his expectations for Maryland this season, and we have to get his thoughts on the teams that he's feeling bullish/bearish on coming up for the upcoming season. So that's on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Chris Cichon. He does such an amazing job over at WBAL in Baltimore. He covers a little bit of everything, the news. I know that he was big with the Baltimore Orioles coverage during the season. He's getting back into college basketball with so many teams out there in the great state of Maryland. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at The Big Cheese Show. And we left off by talking about the main team out there in your state of Maryland with the Terps, and just picking up upon that, how about if we take a little bit more of a just look at the Big Ten in general? How do you take a look at this conference? Because I do think that it's going to be, once again, one of the better ones in all of college basketball. As we know, Maryland was picked towards the bottom half of this conference, but I don't think that that's necessarily a slight on Maryland, more or less that it is a just fact that this Big Ten, I think, is going to be locked and loaded once again. And those West Coast teams in season number 2, I think that they're going to be a whole heck of a lot better than they were in year 1, especially with now being able to get just a little bit more familiarity with the travel.
Yeah, I would like the 2 teams I know that are above the USA Today Big Ten basketball preseason poll, and that's Purdue and Michigan. Based on their coaches there, you've got Matt Painter, who has been very successful there. They didn't quite win the national championship game in the heyday of Zach Edey, but this is a guy who's made it work with 2 guys down low. The last name Williams a couple of years ago, along with Edey, I know was a nice little player there, and that they've had a number of different guards who have been able to play defense and shoot the basketball from 3. And then, Dusty May, we saw the success he had at FAU, now coming to Michigan, quickly turning around that program there. And, just new coaches that are in different locations, not just Maryland's Buzz Williams, but Iowa with a new head coach with Ben McCollum, Indiana with a new head coach, Minnesota with a new head coach. So certainly should be a lot of difference in the world of NIL and a lot of transfer portal and whatnot, too. We're certainly learning about these teams kind of on the fly. It's a little bit different now than back in the day when, guys were staying for longer stretches of time. But Purdue does return Braden Smith, Kaufman Wren, and Fletcher Lawyer. I mean, those are guys who certainly, and that's like 70% of their minutes. So that's big for this Boilermakers team that I think they'll be able to reign supreme once again in this Big Ten, even with the addition of the teams in the West Coast like UCLA, who will be a factor, I'm sure, as well.
Yep, absolutely. And with Purdue, there needs to be Final Four bust sort of mentality with them, in my opinion. When you return those guys in the backcourt, I think that they are in for an absolutely magnificent year. So I'm in lockstep with you there. As Chris Cichon, he does great work over at WBAL in Baltimore, and he's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And you mentioned it. You're out there in the great state of Maryland, and with Towson, they are going to have a very, very nice regional rivalry to begin the season against Loyola of Maryland. And if I'm not mistaken, you've got members of your family that went to Loyola, Maryland. So I want to get your thoughts on both they and the Patriot League, because I know that in terms of your coverage over there at WBAL in Baltimore, you don't do as much on the basketball front, but you do a lot with Navy football. And this Navy team, I think, is going to be interesting because I look at them returning 90+% of their minutes. That's number 1 in all of college basketball, all 365 teams. And I think that this Patriot League, with so many players that are returning to their respective schools, are a nice little throwback in college basketball. And I think that a lot of these Patriot League teams, that includes Loyola Maryland, can really surprise in the non-conference portion of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And Loyola went to the international route as far as constructing their team this year. Jacob Theodosu, I'm hoping I'm saying that right, from Waterloo, Ontario. He transferred from Wyoming. He averaged 13 points per game last year. He's preseason All-Patriot League. Jonas Suratautas from Lithuania, transfer from Radford, 6'10". You've got Ahmet Adair, 6'9" freshman from Sydney, Australia. And then you've got guys like Sam Springer, who played at Air Force last year, 18 games for them, made his collegiate debut against UNC. We'll see what kind of impact a guy like he has. Everett Barnes, a freshman from Burlington, New Jersey. He helped Father Judge High School in Philadelphia win the 24-25 Philadelphia Catholic League, which, if you're familiar with that, that's a strong high school basketball league, no doubt about that. And their coach, I mentioned Loeffler, the top assistant, and he has experience here in Baltimore. He was the head coach of Johns Hopkins, and in that role, they were 114-27, and he had 4 NCAA tournament berths there. Went to Cincinnati, now wanted to get back into coaching. Was at Loyola last year for his first season. They had a sub-500 record. Loyola has a challenging situation at the moment because it's certainly not the days when I was back in school and they had a fiery fan base that they went to the NCAA tournament in like 2015. So this is a group certainly that I think is yearning for more success, but certainly has not had that. And the Navy basketball team here too. They've even got some local guys who are represented from Greenbelt and Upper Marlboro, some of the high schools here. And then, as you know, Navy, they get guys from all over the place, all over the country, whether it's football or basketball. So yeah, this is a team in Navy that should be certainly competing as well too. They had some guys last year who were able to knock down the three-pointer. I think that they'll be competing as well too. And then, when you have the Patriot League, and you'll know this better than me, but like the Colgates, the Lafayettes, those schools are always in the mix as well. And so we'll see how, and Bucknell, I know, can be problematic, I think, for this Loyola team at times. But Loyola now, they have gotten rid of the coach that they had previously with Loeffler, who really had this program in some mediocrity. And so I think the future's bright for both Loyola and Navy. But if we're talking about all the programs in this state, the team that has the best chance of making the NCAA tournament, I think it has to be Towson, given that they have guys returning and that their competition is probably the weakest. And that's weird to say in the CAA, but some of those bottom feeders they should be able to take care of. It's just about getting to the NCAA tournament for Towson this year.
With Towson, it should be NCAA tournament or bust, because we alluded to it. They went 16-2 out there in the Coastal Conference last season. They were unable to get the job done in that conference tournament, but they returned so much from a year ago. They've got a really nice defensive They've got a really nice defensive prowess as well, so I do think that they are going to be able to do a nice job this season. And with Maryland, obviously, a little bit of transition. Probably year number 2 is where we really see them start to rock and roll, as Chris Cichon, who does such great work over at WBAL in Baltimore, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And do want to just open this up a little bit. I know that you're still working to get set for the upcoming college basketball season as well. I know that you're going to do a great job of covering all those teams out there in the great city of Baltimore, out there in the great state of Maryland as a whole. But is there a team or two out there in college basketball? And it can be in your region, it can be just any of the 365 teams that you just take a look at and you're intrigued by. Maybe you think that they're a little bit underrated, maybe you think that they're a little bit overrated, but is there just a team or two that you have your eye on coming into the season?
Yeah, it's got to be, for me, the St. John's Red Storm, and I bring that up because it was cool. I was there for their loss in New York City against Arkansas in the NCAA tournament, and we were at a sports bar that was actually recommended to me by the prop queen, Ariel Epstein. I was up there in town for a fantasy baseball draft. We're like, we got to find a place to watch a basketball game. And yeah, it was absolutely an exciting time to watch them. We know that they fell short. Obviously, Kadari Richmond from Seton Hall, the transfer there, he had himself a tough game in that loss in, I believe it was a Sweet 16 against Arkansas. So yeah, this is a St. John's team that is going to have some turnover from last year, some of the guys that were big time contributors for them, but they have a schedule that opens up with Alabama in the month of November. They're going to play Iowa State in the month of November, and then they'll play a couple of teams that I mentioned in the CAA and the Patriot League in William & Mary and Bucknell. So we'll see if Pitino's group is ready to play. I, growing up in New Jersey, was always a Seton Hall fan and followed them. They had probably the worst year that I can ever remember them having last year. Shaheen Holloway is a legend with the program. I think they're going to be patient with him, especially, but in this NIL era, turnover, you can't have a whole lot of years of being poor and not doing so well. And Seton Hall was basically the top of the state of New Jersey when it comes to college basketball programs, not so much Rutgers. Rutgers had a bad year too last year, so we'll see kind of how it plays out. Who's the best in the Garden State? And Villanova, I want to see how Kevin Willard does there. It's weird to think of him being there. I know Derek Queen posted over the offseason that it was weird to see him in Villanova gear, but we know that he's had tremendous success at Seton Hall, at Maryland, which really he knows, and I think he told the Baltimore Sun he knows he's not well liked down here because of the way that he took the attention away from the players when they were going into the NCAA tournament, and they lost pretty handedly when they played in that game. So yeah, Willard understands that, but when I was listening to the Buzz Williams conversation, I mean, things just move fast in college basketball. Willard was making the move to Villanova, then Buzz Williams got the call, and he said it was in the span of 5 days that the change was made. We'll see what Kevin Willard and how he does and translates to coaching Seton Hall's big-time rival, Villanova. I think he'll do well because he's a great basketball mind, and Villanova is a place that I'm sure a lot of high school players desire to play, a championship program for a number of years. So, I don't think they're going to be going back to the days of Kyle Neptune and that mediocrity. So, yeah, I think I'm going to be very much paying attention to some Big East teams as well as the teams down here in Maryland, that's for sure.
Yep, it is going to be a lot of fun to take a look at what we're going to be getting with both of the sides of that Maryland switcheroo, with Buzz Williams, how he's going to be able to do with the Terps, how Kevin Willard is going to be able to do in season number 1 over there at Villanova. And I'm right there with you with regards to seeing, oh man, that was a rough season for them. So we'll see if they're able to get back online. And a man that is always online, a man that is always firing on all cylinders, that'd be you, Chris. You're doing an absolutely tremendous job out there in WBAL Baltimore. You're really a positionless guy. You're able to cover some sports, you're able to cover some news, you do a little bit of everything. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Greg, thank you as always for having me. I'm on Instagram and X mainly, Big Cheese Show. We're going to be previewing the Navy FAU football game this past Saturday leading up, and then I am working this Sunday as well too, ahead of the Ravens matchup against the Chicago Bears, and then I'll have off next week for Monday and Tuesday. I'll take the time to keep digging into more of this college basketball stuff, so you'll invite me back on again, Greg. Thank you again for having me, bro. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Chris is doing an absolutely tremendous job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He's getting set for what is going to be an amazing season. I know that he is dialed into a little bit of everything out there in the Maryland area. And for those that are fans of my college basketball podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, always did a great job of providing insights there. So a big thanks to Chris for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. Then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I am with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. We're up to over 2,160 straight days without a missed podcast, so you can bank on there being a fresh episode. We've got every single conference covered with regard to an individual conference preview as well, wherever you're getting this podcast. If you look down just the list of shows, the playlist with regards to all these episodes, you're going to find all of those conference previews in there. All 31 conferences have been broken down, and of course, once we get back into the season, once we get that Monday, the first Monday in November, the picks and analysis on every single game, every single day, they will be back in full force. So I appreciate you joining me today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much.